We ready? Huh? Seconds? Yeah. Okay. All right. All right.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day 4 of Congressman Hank Johnson's Week of Hope. Today is the day we talk about appropriations or the community funding projects. These are projects that have been funded through Congressman Hank Johnson in his district. It used to be formerly known as earmarks, in which our nonprofits, our municipalities, our county governments have been able to get your taxpayer dollars coming back to the district to work on projects for the benefit of you and your constituents, which are the congressman's constituents. And Congressman Johnson has been doing this for quite some time. In his 9th term, in his 18th year this year, he is happy to bring home the help that's needed for our constituents, to see people in DeKalb County, Rockdale County, Newton County get a chance to take a bite of the apple and make sure that our nonprofits, such as the Women's Resource Center, the Hank Stewart Foundation, have the chance to have monies to do programs by helping our kids out in the community and other citizens. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to hold us up because it's a lot of information. I want to introduce our congressman, our friend, Congressman Hank Johnson. Congressman.
Thank you all for being here, and welcome to the office of the 4th Congressional District. Is your office. Used to be my law office, by the way. But now it's the office of the people of the 4th Congressional District, who I proudly represent. Thank you for your support across all of those 18 years that I've been in Congress. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but so much has happened, and we've come a long way together. And so today represents the final day of our annual grants workshop, which we call the Week of Hope. And hope stands for helping other people elevate. So hope in and of itself is a great thing to harbor in one's mind. Hope, always hope. But hope without action is kind of just theoretical. And so helping other people elevate is what really hope is all about in the 4th District. And so I'm happy to be at the 4th day of this grants workshop. I want to thank my staff for once again conducting this and enabling the people of the 4th District to access federal funding. And you all may know that for many years, congressional funding, we fund everything, but we had handcuffed ourselves as Congress people. We were not able to actually allocate any specific dollars for projects within our district. They called those earmarks. And it's because the earmark process had been abused for so many years, and it was just cut out for about 10 years. But we brought it back last session of Congress, the 117th, and we awarded what we call community project funding, not earmarks, but that's really what it is, earmarks. But rather than $400 million bridges to nowhere, which is what got earmarks erased, each congressperson has been allowed to allocate up to about $15 million in community project grant funding in the 117th and again in the 118th Congress. So of course, we begin the 119th session of Congress in January 3rd. And when we do reconvene in the 119th Congress, if Congress does, if the House reverts back to democratic control as it was in the 117th Congress, then there will not be a ban on nonprofit organizations being able to apply for the community project funding. And in fact, perhaps we may see a rise in the amount of community project funding that is permissible. I'll be a strong proponent of that because nobody knows better the needs of the fourth district than the Congress people or the congressperson of the fourth congressional district. And so we want to have enough resources, or we want to have more resources to address the concerns that we have in the fourth district, as do other representatives in other districts. They want to have more money also. And so that's what it's going to be all about. And so I want to now flip this over to Antoine Monarch, who is my legislative director, who has been involved in this community project grant funding process for how many years?
105 now.
Okay, so you've been with it the whole time.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay, so he knows all about it. And so with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Antoine.
All right. Thank you, Congressman, for the introduction. As the Congressman as he mentioned, I'm Antoine Monarch, and I have the privilege of serving as his legislative director. It's an honor to be here today with you all to talk about the process in which we bring funding home to the 4th Congressional District of Georgia. In fiscal year 24, we were able to secure $15.8 million in community project funding. And this year, we were able to secure $11.2 million in community project funding through the FY25, pending the full bill being signed into law. So we have been busy trying to continue to put people over politics and bring the resources back home to the district. So I would like to thank both our district offices and our DC office staff for helping in this process. Now, as we begin this presentation, I want to let everybody know that we are live streaming this video, and we'll be providing the slides shortly after we conclude today. So as we start slides, I would like to take a moment to provide an overview on the appropriations process in Congress. So this process is a critical function that ensures our government continues to operate smoothly. The foundation of this process is rooted in the U.S. Constitution, specifically Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7, that states, "No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of the appropriations made by the law," and a regular statement of account of receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published for that time to time. So this means that every dollar spent by the federal government must be approved through the appropriations process, ensuring accountability and transparency in how public funds are being used. So in other words, you can't just open the piggy bank and start throwing money around like you're on a shopping spree, though wouldn't some people like that? Now, each year, Congress has one essential duty: to pass appropriations that keep the federal government functioning. This process is not just a formality, it's a necessity. Without it, we risk a lapse in funding, which could lead to a government shutdown, a situation that halts essential services, disrupts the lives of millions of Americans, and impact our economy. Our fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th, and we are currently in fiscal year 24 as we speak. Now, the process to set spending levels for fiscal year 25 is already underway, and this involves detailed discussions and negotiations to determine how funds will be allocated across various government functions. Importantly, each fiscal year, a new appropriation bill must be passed by both the House and the Senate, and then signed into law by the President. Now, this bill covers all 12 appropriation subcommittees, each responsible for a different sector of the budget. The goal is to have these bills passed before the new fiscal year begins, ensuring that no interruption in government services occur. So the appropriations process is a crucial task that Congress must complete annually to keep our government running efficiently. It's about making sure that every dollar is spent wisely and that our government can continue to serve the American people. Now, as I walk you through these critical steps in the House appropriations process, this process is fundamental to how our government is funded and operates each year. And understanding it helps us appreciate the complexities behind every federal budget. So step one, we kick off with the 12 House appropriation subcommittees. These subcommittees are responsible for reviewing member requests. This is where individual members of Congress submit their funding priorities. The subcommittees take these requests, develop these specific bills, and then begin holding subcommittee markups to discuss, amend, and finalize these proposals. Ideally, this should happen between April and May, which gives enough time to carefully consider and craft spending bills. However, in practice, this timeline often stretches into June or even July sometimes, and this delay can be due to a variety of factors, including complexity of the budget issues at hand, the volume of requests received, and the political negotiations that inevitably occur. Now, once the subcommittees have done their part, step two begins, and here the full Appropriations Committee take over. They hold committee markups to further amend and refine the spending bills that were developed by the subcommittees. And these committee markups are crucial because they are where the broader implications of the budget are considered and where final adjustments are made before the bill moves to the floor. Now, this step usually happens in May and June, but as with the subcommittee work, it can stretch into July or even later, depending on how contentious or complex the issues are. Now, when this timeline extends, it can create a bottleneck in the overall appropriations process, which may delay the passage of the necessity funding. And next, we arrive at step three, where the House as a whole considers each appropriation bill. Now, the goal here is to complete consideration of all 12 appropriation bills by August recess, ensuring that government is fully funded and operational for the next fiscal year. Recently, to expedite this process, the Appropriations Committee has utilized mini bus packages. Now, these are bundles of several appropriation bills combined into a single package to expedite the process of getting these bills across the House floor. Now, however, it's important to note that this Congress, House Republicans have demonstrated an unwillingness to use mini bus packages and prefer to do each bill one by one, further delaying and it could require more individual votes on separate bills, complicating the timeline and making it harder to meet our August deadline, which we are seeing now. We've passed 5 of the 12 so far. We still have 7 of the 12 bills left to pass when we get back to DC.
And only 3 weeks of legislative time within which to do it. Correct. So at this point, if anybody would like to leave their seats and come sit at the table, feel free to do so. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Thank you.
And okay.
All right, so then we move to step 4, which includes the Senate, which operates on a separate timeline than the House. Now, the Senate's process includes, similar to the House, reviewing, amending, and approving this version of the appropriation bill. And it's important to know that their timing can differ significantly from the House, as currently they have still yet to pass a appropriation bill on the floor. So to stay informed on the Senate's progress, I recommend you reaching out to Senator Ossoff and Senator Warnock's office, who can provide up-to-date details on the Senate funding timeline and their plans on getting it across the Senate floor. Step 5, the 2 chambers, the House and the Senate, come together to reconcile their respective versions of the appropriation bill. This is also known as conferencing, usually resulting in a negotiated bill that both chambers can agree on, often in the form of an omnibus package. An omnibus is when you bring together all 12 of the subcommittee bills and you put them into one big bill for a vote. However, this process can stretch over several months as both sides work to reach a compromise. Now, to prevent a government shutdown during these negotiations, Congress often passes a continuing resolution, better known as a CR, which temporarily funds the government at previous fiscal years levels. And it's important to understand that CRs cannot be used to implement, generally aren't used to implement CPFs. A full year funding bill is required for that. And then the final steps, Step 6 is where the president must sign the full year appropriation bill or a temporary CR into law before the end of the fiscal year on September 30th to avoid a government shutdown. However, there's been a tension, especially from Republicans in the House Freedom Caucus, who are pushing for deeper spending cuts beyond what was agreed upon. And as of now, we still have 7 of the 12 appropriation bills to pass in the House. And without a full year funding package in place, CPFs, as I mentioned, cannot be enacted into law, making it critical to resolve these issues promptly. All right, now we go to a timeline of the funding process. So for fiscal years 24 and 25, President Biden budgets were both released on March 9th of 23 and 24 respectively. This slight delay from the usual February release shows just how complicated the budget process can be. Every year's budget is a bit different because it's shaped by whatever is happening the year before, whether it's dealing with economics ups and downs, responding to national crises, or launching new projects. The budget is the administration's way of saying, here's how we're handling things. So if the budget comes out a little late, just remember, good things take time, like fine wine or a good barbecue. Now, next, let's talk about the appropriations request process, which usually happens between February and March. During this time, members of Congress put in their requests for funding to support specific projects in their district. This includes something we all know as community project funding, or better known, CPFs. CPFs are crucial because they direct federal money to projects that really matter to local communities, addressing unique needs and helping develop our neighborhoods. For the past 2 Congresses, each congressman has been able to submit up to 15 CPF requests. This limit means we have to be strategic in picking the projects that will do the most good for our constituents. It's not just about asking for money, it's about making sure that every dollar counts. And for fiscal year 25, the deadline to submit those requests were April of 2024. Missing that deadlines mean that the projects might have to wait another year, which is why it's so important to be organized and timely with these submissions. Now, I want to make it clear that the deadline for submitting CPLs for fiscal year 25 has already passed, but don't worry, that's not the end of the road. We're here today to get you ready for the next round of CPLs that will be coming forward next year. This presentation is all about guiding you through the process of submitting projects for fiscal year 26. Starting early is key, and the application process will likely begin in spring of 2025, usually between February and April. But those dates can change, so continue to monitor our website as we'll continue to give guidance on appropriations as we get it from House leadership. Now, the early bird gets the worm, or in this case, the funding. So be prepared. Being prepared will give us the best shot at securing the resources for our district. Now let's dive into the nitty-gritty of eligibility for CPFs. CPFs are specifically set up for government bodies and nonprofits on a limited basis. This is to make sure that the money goes towards benefiting the public and not just lining someone's pockets. But here's where things get a bit tricky. For fiscal year 25, there was a big change. For HUD Economic Development Initiatives, better known as EDIs, only governmental entities and public universities could get the funding. Unfortunately, nonprofits, which often do a ton of work for our communities, were left out of HUD this year. And it's kind of like being invited to a cookout and you get there and ain't nothing left over but a piece of cake. So while nonprofits can still get funding in general, it's becoming a lot harder, especially since the House majority decided this Congress to cut out labor HHS funding for community project fundings. Labor HHS is used to be the go-to for nonprofits looking for money to keep the doors open and the lights on. Now it's like trying to win a game of musical chairs when they're taking away most of the chairs. And just to be clear, individuals or for-profit companies cannot get CPFs. This rule is there to make sure that the funds are used for the greater good, not for someone's personal gain. So if you're thinking about starting that new for-profit charity with this money, think again. Now, moving on, if you do get CPF funds, there's one thing you absolutely have to do. Use the money within the year designated for the funding. No exceptions. If you don't show that you can spend the entire funds requested for that time, the committee might end up cutting your request or choosing another project overall. And if you drag your feet. So the moment that the money hits your account, you need to have a plan in place to go. Community support is also a big deal when it comes to getting your CPF applications. It's not enough to just say, hey, the community likes the projects, you need to prove it. The letters from mayors, state legislators, community leaders, constituents, maybe even a glowing article or two in a local newspaper. The more evidence you have to show the committee that this project is wanted by the constituents in the district and needed in your district, the better it is that you will get approved. Finally, you need to make a strong case for why your project is essential. If it's located in Georgia's 4th Congressional District and benefits our constituents, it's going to get priority. But it's not just about location, it's about the why. Why does your project matter? What problems does it solve? The better you can explain this, the better we can fight for it. Think of it like telling a great story. The more compelling it is, the more people want to get involved. So navigating this process isn't exactly a walk in the park. It takes careful planning, knowing the rules, and proving that your project is needed and supported by the community. But if you can check all those boxes, you're well on your way to having your project thoroughly vetted and potentially included in upcoming requests. And next, we're going to talk about additional guidance for submitting requests. So let's talk about how you can get federal support for your projects through CPFs. This is really important if we want to secure funding needed to make things happen in our district. First thing first, figure out which group or subcommittee your project fits under. Each subcommittee has its own rules, priorities, so picking the right one is key to getting your project funded. Some of the big ones are transportation and housing, better known as THUD, interior, environment, labor, HHS, oh, they've cut that out now, and education, interior. But here's the catch. Recently, projects under labor HHS, as I mentioned, weren't allowed to get CPF funded because of the new rules. Our subcommittees, other subcommittees that might work for you include agriculture, justice, and energy. Picking the right subcommittee is like choosing the right line in the DMV. If you choose the wrong one, you might be waiting forever, or maybe get sent back to the start. So once you figured that out, take a look at what we have on Congressman Johnson's website from last year to give you a guide to crafting your request for this upcoming year. As I mentioned, as new leadership comes in, guidance might change. So be sure to pay attention to the new guidance as well. Trust me, it's a lot easier to copy a good idea than reinvent the wheel. It's also a good idea to check out the latest rules for fiscal year 25 that were put out by current majority. These rules will give you a heads up on what to expect. They also include detail on how much local or state money you might need to match the federal funds. Some subcommittees want more local investment than others, so knowing this ahead of time can help you save a lot of headaches. And remember, these guidelines could change next year depending on who's in control of the House. So staying flexible is key. In short, let's make sure you pick the right subcommittee, learn from past successes, and keep up with the latest rules. So as we talk about CPFs, it's also important to know common mistakes that can trip you up in receiving your funding requests. If we can spot these challenges early, we'll be able to help you better make a better project and make sure your proposals are rock solid. One of the biggest mistakes is trying to get funding for a project that isn't a nonprofit or government entity. As I mentioned earlier, CPFs are meant for projects that benefit the public, so they are only available to nonprofits and governmental organizations. If your project doesn't fit into these categories, it won't be considered. And another crucial factor is where your project is located. If it's not within the 4th Congressional District, then it most likely won't be eligible for funding. However, there are certain projects that we do accept, such as projects that will benefit the 4th, such as maybe MARTA expanding into help Metro Atlanta, or different energy projects that benefit Metro Atlanta, things of that nature. So if you're on the wire about if your project's eligible, just feel free to reach out to me or our staff, and we'll be able to get with you to let you know if it's something that's appropriate to submit. So cost sharing is another area where things can go sideways. Each subcommittee has rules about how much of the funding comes from the federal government, how much comes from non-federal sources, usually requiring an 80-20 or 75-20 split. If your project doesn't meet these requirements or whatever requirements are set out, more than likely it won't make the cut. It's essential to check the guidelines carefully to ensure that your budget lines up with what's expected. Beyond cost sharing, your project also has to meet the specific rules of the subcommittee that it falls under. For instance, project under labor HHS has a totally different rules and regulations to ones of interior or THUD. So make sure that you know exactly what rules and guidelines that your subcommittee have. And if your project can't use the fund within a year, then like I mentioned earlier, more than likely it's a no-go. Another common pitfall is not showing enough community support. As I mentioned, you have to prove that it's needed, why it's needed, and show strong support from your community. Requesting too much money without a clear budget is also a no. So you need to show that you've carefully planned out your project and that every dollar will be spent well. If your budget isn't clear, it's going to raise eyebrows and might make people question if you can manage the money, and often the subcommittee would like to see a detailed breakdown. So if you're requesting 1 million, maybe we need 100,000 for this, 200,000 for this, 300,000 for this, another 100,000 for this, just to give them more of a breakdown on what you need, why you need it, instead of coming with just a blanket $1 million ask. And lastly, avoid including expenses in your budget that aren't allowed. For example, things like staff salary and operational costs weren't eligible for CPF funding in the last couple of years. Including these could jeopardize your whole application. Always check the latest guidelines to make sure that everything you're asking for is still allowed. So to avoid these pitfalls, it's crucial to review the guidelines as soon as they're available. The rules for FY26 are expected to come out in, as I mentioned, spring of 25. So keep an eye out for that. And by staying on top of these details, we can ensure that projects meet all the requirements and avoid any last minute snags that might happen. Now let's focus on things that you can control. I know navigating the world of CPFs might seem a bit like trying to assemble furniture from IKEA without the instructions, but don't worry, today we're going to focus on what you can do to actually control that process. First off, let's talk about the basics. If you haven't already, take some time to familiarize yourself with the FY25 guidance. Think of it as the manual you don't want to toss in the trash right away. It'll help you understand what kind of funding is available and, just as importantly, what's off limits. Knowing this ahead of time will save you a lot of headaches down the road. We strongly encourage you to have your FY26 CPF proposals wrapped up by the end of February 25. So that way, if once the guidance come out, we usually expect it between February and April. So if you have it wrapped up by February, if that guidance comes out in February, you're already ahead of the line to get your project vetted and look through. Once the application form goes live on our website, you'll want to be ready to hit the submit button with your project so we can be able to reach out to you and let you know if you have everything or what else you might need prior to the deadline for us to submit it on our end. Now, the funding process is about predictable as Atlanta traffic during rush hour, but these factors are beyond our control. And while we love to guarantee the world, it's best not to put all your funding in one basket. So plan ahead, make sure your organization has a backup plan. For instance, we have WRDA. If your project might fit under WRDA, transportation infrastructure has the resurfacing authorization coming up as well. So just reach out to us, and if your project doesn't make appropriations, you can also reach out and say, hey, is there any other bucket that our project might fit under throughout the next Congress? Now, once a new guideline is released, make sure you read it thoroughly. I know it might not be the most thrilling bedtime story, but it's essential. Now, understanding the guidelines inside and out will help you avoid any surprises. And when it comes down to your application, there are a few key details you don't want to overlook. make sure you include your organization's full legal name and address. Trust me, you don't want your application ended up in the mystery mail pile because you forgot to include your contact info. Now, speaking of contact info, it's crucial to provide a responsive point of contact, someone who can answer calls and emails without playing phone tag for days. And while you're at it, pack your application with as much information as possible. The more information we have, the better. So you can never over-inform us. Now, if your office has any questions about your application, don't worry to reach out. We're very responsive. Get answers back to you as soon as we can. Work with the committee to get answers to your applications as well. The faster we get the information we need, the faster we can move forward. So take control of the things you can, be prepared, and stay informed are the most important things of the next. And here on this slide are other helpful resources that you guys can utilize. As I mentioned, these slides will be provided to you. So if you go and click each one of those, it'll take you directly to the guidance for each of those subcommittees, as well as the member request guidance. So we've covered a lot of ground today. If you're feeling a bit like you've run a marathon in a maze, don't worry, you're not alone. But here's the good news. You don't have to navigate this by yourself. We're here to help in whatever way we can as we prepare for fiscal year 26 appropriations. Our office is here to help where we're needed. We know you're doing great things for people in the 4th Congressional District of Georgia, and we're ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with you in making sure those projects get supported. So keep in touch. After all, we can't fight for what we don't know about. And trust me, the congressman loves a good fight, especially when it's for the right cause. And doing work for our constituents is always the right cause. If you have any lingering questions, or maybe you want to chat, I'm just an email away. You can reach me at antoine.monach@mail.house.gov. Or if you prefer to go straight to the top, drop a line to our Chief of Staff, Marcus Garza, at marcus.garza@mail.house.gov. He's great with questions and even better with answers. So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this. We're in this together. Let's keep the lines of communication open. Let's keep our eyes on the prize. And most importantly, let's keep fighting for the good of the Georgia's 4th Congressional District. Thank you. Give it back to Candace.
Imran, thank you. This has been fantastic. For applications that are put in the first quarter of 25, what is when would those funds?
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our last session of our 4 Series Grants Workshop. We hope that you learned some valuable information, and we hope that you will join us next year when we do 2025. If you have any questions, Antoine's information is on the presentation screen, or you can reach out to me at Candice, KANDICE.williams@mail.house.gov. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.